Israeli Prime Minister has been speaking in the wake of strikes on Hamas officials in Qatar. He said he authorized the surgical precision strike on Hamas. The United Nations has condemned Israel's strike on Hamas as a disregard of international law. Qatar has also condemned the attack as criminal.
We are just learning about the Israeli attacks in Qatar, a country that has been playing a very positive role to achieve a ceasefire and release of all hostages. I condemn this flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar. All parties must work towards achieving a permanent ceasefire, not destroying it.
Well, let's bring in international affairs analyst Dr. Marek Laskiewicz for latest developments. Dr. Marek, glad to have you. Well, this is quite interesting. Hamas is commenting, says U.S. proposal they were sitting down to consider was a deception to bring the Hamas leaders together to attack them. What do you make of this? Because it's come out now that U.S. knew of this attack that Israel carried out in Qatar.
Well, there are three aspects here. First of all, no one would have known precisely where they were to meet. So I don't think the United States or Israel could have planned it that well. For their part, the Hamas felt safe in Qatar because it is, after all, a sovereign international territory. And unfortunately, Israel does not obey any international law. So that was a mistake on their part. But the third point, very important point, is that US, in effect, gave a go-ahead for flagrant breach of international law. And this is the third point, is extremely worrying.
Israel, Marek, seems totally unhinged, attacking Hamas leadership in Qatar. And Trump, knowing about this, U.S. also having a base in Qatar, Qatar being one of the people who are in negotiations for this peace deal. What is Israel telling the world if they want to kill one of the chief negotiators for a ceasefire?
Yeah, there are two aspects to this. First and foremost, it is that Israel, as you rightly say, attacked negotiators, and therefore there is obviously one possible unfortunate explanation that Israel is not looking for any sort of agreement with Hamas, which would tie together with its desire to have all Gazans, quote, voluntarily emigrate, unquote. And this destruction that we're seeing in Gaza City would be a part of this strategy. So whilst the US is indeed, or was talking about a deal, actually together with Israel, they're sabotaging the deal. And this is very bad. There's another aspect to this. This is in Qatar, which, as the UN stated, was one of the most helpful nations in the mediation process. It actually has an agreement with Israel. And the only effect of all this is that Israel tramples all over its rights, and it's absolutely no interest whatsoever. And this actually leaves Qatar itself in a very difficult situation, quite how to respond. But yes, to go back to the original point, there is an implication here that Israel and USA, of course, does not actually want an agreement about the hostages and simply wants the Gazans out.
So how does this impact the relationship between US and Qatar? How does this impact their relationship?
It now hinges on what Qatar wants to do. The US and Israel have shown that they just have no regard whatsoever for Qatar or for international law in this respect. And Qatar has, of course, tried to work with Israel and USA, tried to mediate, and in many ways, this strike has shown the entire route to be bankrupt. No good has come of it for Qatar, except that it suddenly gets attacked. Please note, by countries not at war at. I mean, if the missile was sent, let us put it like this, into another country, then that would be technically, it is an act of war. And yet, Israel and USA just don't care. And so it's up to Qatar how or whether they choose to respond. But in principle, they could break off relations with Israel and USA. They could refuse to carry on any more mediation. There are all sorts of possibilities. It remains to see what Qatar will do. If they do nothing, then they will show that they can be basically walked all over by Israel and USA. That is the problem.
Marek, does this shock you how blatantly Israel disobeys international law and nobody seems to do anything about it?
No. International law here and the UN has been shown up to be utterly ineffectual if USA and Israel choose to walk all over it. There is no international law. To that extent, the Trump presidency has a sort of air of anarchy about it, which is most unfortunate. But if you say there's no international law that Israel can attack at will, then quite why is the world condemning Russia? I mean, if Israel can do it, why not Russia? Or for that matter, anybody else? And this is the problem, is it not? The international law is in many ways a fiction, and it is more like a jungle in the world than any sort of civilized comity of nations.
That's the danger. And you know, there is Taiwan and China on the other side. But let's move from this attack and what is happening in Gaza. Does this look like what some commentators have long believed, that the ancestral land of the Palestinians are being taken over by Israel?
Yes, basically. That's precisely what is happening. By destroying these high-rises, by destroying as much of the housing as possible, and of course the hospitals have gone and so on, the idea is, or at least this will be one explanation for all these actions, is to create such bad conditions that the Gazans will want to leave because they cannot carry on. In other words, they'll just abandon their land. In a sense, is to break their spirit. Whether this will work or not is another matter, but that would be one explanation for these, not just events in Gaza City, but also what's happening on the West Bank, where Israel's making it very clear it wants to annex, it wants the Palestinians out.
Now, Palestinians say there's no place left in Gaza. Even the UN says nowhere can be considered safe. So Israel is apparently destroying the entire Gaza and forcing the people out through the back door, whether they like it or not.
That last sentence isn't quite right. They are certainly creating the conditions by which to break the spirit of the Palestinians, and here the Gazans in particular, like the settler violence in the West Bank, to make the Palestinians want to leave. Technically, they are not yet being forced out because there is no Gestapo-like organization arresting them and taking them to deportation camps as happened under Nazi Germany. So we are a step from that, but only a step, because obviously the destruction of all the property means it's going to be hard for Gazans to carry on.
Do you think that the UN has outlived its use? It seems terribly handicapped to do anything while what some have dubbed genocide goes on.
Yes, the UN has always been utterly impotent and is utterly impotent. Let's both sides agree. It plays no part in the mediation process. Please note that it's Qatar, Egypt that's played this process, with America and Israel on one side and Palestinians on the other. The other aspect of the UN has shown up to be, if you like, a paper tiger, if it's a tiger even to that extent. And of course, this means that the world roughly runs on the lines of anarchy and brute force, as stated before. And therefore, waiting in the wings are all sorts of other conflicts that could go the whole way. China and Taiwan, as you mentioned before. India and Pakistan is another one. There's no end of potential conflicts. For example, Russia could move on to places like Poland. There could be a nuclear war. And the UN in all this is a zero. And that is the unfortunate truth.
Yeah, because Heinrich Merz, Vice Chancellor of Germany, has said that the problem is not just Russia attacking Ukraine. It could just take it a little bit farther to other European nations. Before I let you go, added to all this, the Israeli government refuses to allow international news organizations, including the BBC, into Gaza to report freely. Why are they not allowing media organizations to report what is happening in Gaza?
Yeah, and this is an attempt to have a news blackout, obviously, with the implication that the Israelis are doing more than is being reported. Fortunately, very brave journalists have gone in there, and so we have some idea of what's going on. And therefore, the attacks, for example, there was the attack on Red Cross and so on, all this has been fortunately reported on, and on the aid workers and on the aid people going for aid. And so this ban on foreign journalists has only been semi-effective, but it unfortunately gives rise to the impression that Israel's motives are of the worst. Otherwise, why would it refuse to let them in?
Yeah, briefly before I go, this thought just came to me before I came on air. White House, as yet, had not spoken concerning the attack on Qatar. Could you hazard a guess briefly on what one might expect from the White House when they eventually speak?
I think the White House is looking for deniability that had anything to do with it, but it's coming out that obviously America had something, did give the go-ahead, apparently Trump himself. And this would actually show, as we said before, that there is no room for negotiation. After all, if you kill all the negotiating team, there's no one to negotiate with, at least initially. And so therefore, this actually puts America in a very bad light, hence the silence now. And it remains to be seen if they make any official comment at all.
Exactly. I mean, if you kill the negotiators, what are you saying? You're practically saying there's no need to negotiate. Thank you so much, International Affairs Analyst there, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you so much.